Welcome, everybody, to Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, the author of Writing That Gets Noticed, Find Your Voice, Become a Better Storyteller, Get Published, which was named by Poets and Writers a best book for writers. Every week, I speak with novelists, with authors, with writers of every niche to talk about their tips, their tricks, their strategies, and how the sauce is made, including creative advice. I'll talk about essays and articles and share my own experience from 3 decades of publishing. So join me every week and grow your business and build your craft with Freelance Writing Direct. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. And follow along on Substack, where I share special clips for subscribers only at estelleserasmus.substack.com. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, and today I am so happy to have Bianca Marais back with us on the program. And let me tell you a little bit about Bianca if you don't know. She co-hosts the popular podcast, The Shit No One Tells You About Writing, which is aimed at helping emerging writers get published. She teaches creative writing through the podcast and was named a winner of the Excellence in Teaching Award for Creative Writing at the University of Toronto's School of Continuing Studies. She lives in Toronto, where she loves playing escape room games and writing about strong female protagonists. Welcome back, Bianca.
Thank you so much for having me, Estelle. It's always so lovely getting to chat with you.
It really is. And oh my gosh, Bianca. So the last time you were on the program, we talked about the Witches of Moonshine Manor. And I feel that a most puzzling murder is that on steroids.
That's a great description. Great description.
Thank you. Feel free to use it. So tell me in your words how you would describe this book, because I don't want to give anything away. So I want you to say it in your words.
Yeah, so I mean, we've called it Glass Onion meets Succession meets Prince Harry's Spare, but with magical people. So it is a closed room murder mystery with a magical royal family where everybody's vying for dominance and succession. And there is a murder that happens, and we have a protagonist, Destiny Whip, who was a child prodigy, who is an enigmatologist, who comes to Erie Island after she gets a mysterious invitation, and she is there to try and prevent a murder from happening. So there is a lot happening in this book. There's a ton of puzzles. There's choose your own adventure chapters. You can email the main character for clues. So it's on steroids.
This is such an interactive experience if the reader chooses to make it an interactive experience. So for me, I was thinking there are parts where you said there are tons of puzzles. And I was thinking, do I email or do I just try and figure it out and then skip to the page? I was skipping to the page and just moving forward, which is a wonderful part of the process. Do you have a lot of people emailing you like to get the answers?
Yeah, it's been insane. So I have the email on my phone just to see because, everything is set up automatically. So people will email with clue 1, and then there's an automatic response that goes out for clue 1. And if people email with clue 6, there's an automatic response. So it took quite a bit of setting up to make sure that all the automatic responses were going out, and there's bonus content as well. And a lot of people are emailing. And I can actually see when people read, because there's a certain period at night where the email just lights up. And then obviously during the day, people are at work. So it's been wonderful to see people diving into that part of it, because when I was a child, I always wanted to interact with the main character. I wanted to be the main character. I wanted to feel a part of the story. And so a lot of people have embraced that. But like you say, if that's not your jam, you can just go to the back, find the answer, and then keep moving along. So I wanted it to appeal to both kinds of readers.
Yeah, and it's really a big part of who you are because your brainchild, the shit no one tells you about writing, has that interactive element that I think was one of the first podcasts to do that. Send in your queries or, we'll build together a group where you can have like a beta reading group. It's really just taking it forward. I mean, there's just so many elements to talk about. You have this amazing protagonist, Destiny Whip. And I'm always careful not to give too much away, but like you said, she's a child prodigy and she has this amazing gift. She's a seer. I mean, that'll come through. And then she has a childhood friend. New characters are getting introduced. And I'll be honest, at one point I was like, how am I going to keep them all straight? And I was worried. I thought, it's a lot. It's a lot to remember. And then there was a point where I was just so immersed that I was like, oh, it doesn't even matter anymore. I get who Hexibus is. I get who Mordecai Scrufflemore is. I get all these people. But for me, I was worried. Like I thought, is it too many? But it wasn't. That's what I want to say.
It was. I was worried too. I really was. This is the most point of views I've ever written. I think there's like, if you include the choose your own adventure chapters, there's probably about 12 point of views, including that of a raccoon. It's a lot, but in order to build up this kind of world where anybody can be a suspect and to give the reader enough, clues so that they're theorizing as to who the murderer is and why they did it, etc. You really do need to set up a whole group of suspects. And this is a very dysfunctional family. So I had a lot of fun writing all the different members, and there's ex-wives and new wives. But throughout, there is a family tree that I had a lot of fun with. So there's like this imaginary historian who keeps correcting the family tree as new reveals happen, and they keep scribbling things out and adding things in, which makes it a lot more fun as well. Yeah, there we go. There it is there.
That's what I thought was so fascinating. The tree keeps changing, but you know why it's changing as the reader, because this one is revealed and that one is revealed, or a possibility. And even at the end, there were some surprises. There were a lot of potential villains, which I loved. And so that was a revelation. And I always love when, even if things are being revealed throughout, which some weren't, there's still twists at the end that you're like, oh, I didn't see that coming. I thought I saw something else coming, like I was right about something else, but I was wrong, or I overlooked something that came later. And that's part of
Yeah.
the enjoyment.
Yeah, I mean, if you want your reader to be engaged, and this is true of any genre, but this genre especially, is you want the reader forming theories. You want them having questions. You want them turning the pages to find out if they're right. And the more theories that a reader has, the more engaged they are, and the more they're actively participating in your story rather than just sitting and being spoon-fed. And I think for any genre, that's so important, is planting those curiosity seeds, deciding when you're going to reveal things, how long you're going to keep certain things for. Obviously, you can't keep everything until the end, because then the reader feels manipulated and they feel frustrated, and that's not going to get them through Act Two. So you need to have a steady drip of reveals. But at the end, especially in this genre, you want them to be like, oh my goodness, I did not see that coming. And maybe there are some things that they were like, oh, I got that right. And then as a reader, you feel so gratified because you were like, I was paying attention and I got that right.
I want to ask you how you decided I'm going to take on writing 12 or more POVs. I'm going to deal with puzzles. Because I remember the last time we spoke, you were like, yeah, I'm working on a book. And I think I had sent you something, a rune or something. And you were like, oh, maybe I could use that for the book because I'm using all sorts of puzzles. I was like, oh, that's so interesting. So how did you decide all the pieces of this? It's just really just to the nth degree of everything you've been doing before.
Yeah, I didn't decide. That's the honest answer. When I started this novel, Estelle, I've told you before, I'm a pantser. I fly by the seat of my pants. I tried very hard to plot this novel because it's a closed room murder mystery. And I was like, I'm going to have to plot it. And it resisted every attempt I had to plot it. And so I was like, okay, I don't know who's going to get murdered. I don't know why. I don't know who kills them, but let's just begin. And I had this main character and I trusted her. I trusted her instincts. She's someone who really notices things that other people don't pay attention to. And so in writing, I became her and started really paying attention to things. And each thing arose as it needed to. I didn't know when I started this book that it would require so many POVs. I thought I could get away with far fewer. And then, of course, you get to a certain point and you realize something needs to be revealed to the reader here, but Destiny can't know it yet, but the reader needs to know it. So, how can the reader find out if Destiny doesn't know? And so, for me, all of this came about really organically. At each point of the book, as it needed something, I gave the book what it needed, whether it was a different POV, whether it was a puzzle. It's just sort of listening to those instincts. And I've said it before, every single book teaches you how to write it. It doesn't matter how many books I write, and I change genres and I experiment, but each book teaches me how to write it, and each book is entirely different in terms of the process to the one that came before.
That's amazing. And you said something here, like you switch genres. A lot of people, A, aren't comfortable doing that, and B, don't know how to do that. Is that something that you just pants along? Or, I mean, obviously you helm a podcast that shares craft advice, and you have a huge amount of it yourself, and you're also learning as you speak to people, as I am every day.
Yeah, you know what? So publishers prefer if you stay in one lane because it makes it so much easier for them to market you. If they know you write historical fiction or if they know you write romance, it means it's much, much easier to market you because your readers will see the book on the shelf and they know what they're getting. So it is so much harder to be a writer who goes, okay, I'm just going to switch genres without using a pen name. I did say to my publisher when we did The Witches of Moonshine Manor that I was happy to use a different name. And they said no, they wanted to use my name. And so we've used that throughout. But we are creatives, Estelle. I am a writer because I'm really creative and I like challenging myself. I like giving myself these challenges and saying, can you do this? Can you write in the genre? And so I'm really lucky that my agent, Cece, is so wonderfully supportive. Each time I change genres, she's just like, okay, we'll run with that. But I like to think that I did each change kind of strategically because when I wrote The Witches of Moonshine Manor, this was in the middle of COVID. People were wanting real escapist reads at that point. They weren't really wanting such serious literature, and witches were quite big at that time. And so that book, did really well in Canada because of that. And another thing that COVID did for us is it made us all turn to puzzles. I know so many people who do puzzles now who were never doing them before. And so, it felt to me that it was time for a puzzle book. And a lot more of these books are coming out now. So I wasn't the only person who had this idea. I think a lot of people had this idea, but now there's more and more of these books coming out. But luckily, we were at the forefront of that. So it is a bit of flexing my creative muscles, but it is also a little bit strategic as well.
I love both parts of that because yes, as creative people, we're always looking. Like I'm never satisfied with the status quo. I always have to kind of tweak it or do something different. So I really appreciate that. In terms of the puzzles, how did you acquire them, find them, figure them out? Are you a puzzle whiz yourself? I know you said you like escape rooms, and that has a puzzle component. They frustrate me. I try them, and I'm like, we'll do the beginner, and I still struggle. Some of the stuff I get. If it's words related, maybe, but
Yeah.
mathematical type puzzles, no.
I'm terrible at math puzzles as well. So my husband helped me put those together for the book. The word ones I did myself. He's really good at the math puzzles. We're lucky that in Toronto we have sort of a team, an escape room team, and we do these escape rooms together. And so I'm constantly learning from them. They're much better at it than I am because I'm only good at certain things. So I did want to create a kind of escape room vibe in this book that you become a participant in it. And so, I got some friends to do the puzzles along the way, and some of them were like, oh, they're way too easy. And some people were like, oh, no, they're too difficult. And so that's when I had to come up with, okay, if it's too difficult, then how do I give people clues? Because I don't want the puzzles to all be so easy. And we were thinking if we put the clues in the back of the book, people might see the answer when they're looking for the clues. So that's how we came up with the idea for emails. It was again through a need because people are different in the way they think, in the way they problem solve. And some people find some of these puzzles really easy and some of them find certain puzzles really difficult. So we tried to appeal to all different kind of thinkers, those who are more language based, those who are more mathematically based. And I think the big difficulty with this book was trying to figure out where to put the puzzles because you didn't want to slow down the pacing of a story. There's a whole bunch of instances where the pacing is building and building and building. And if you stop at that point for the reader to solve a puzzle, it slows down the momentum. And you wanted what was revealed in the puzzle to move the plot forward. So that took a bit of calibration, was really figuring out where to put them, how each reveal added to the story and moved the story along.
How did you write this? Like, how long did it take for you to write it? How did you structure your day to do the pieces? Did you separate it? Did you write the puzzle separately? Obviously, you probably couldn't because it had to move the plot along. So it had to go with
Yeah.
chapters. I guess you had to assign a chapter to a puzzle.
Yeah, I think I took about a year or so with this book, but it was like really immersed in it. And again, I would get to a certain point, and at that point, whatever the book needed, then that's what I would do, whether it was figuring out the family tree or whether it was putting in a choose your own adventure chapter or whether it was a particular puzzle. And then I would stop the writing and try and figure out, okay, what kind of puzzle would work best here? How would this reveal lead to the next thing? So it was a lot of stop and start, and I can't move on with a story and just go, I'm going to leave this part blank. I know a lot of writers do that. They'll sort of write the first act and then they'll write act three and then they'll come back. For me, I need to know that the foundation that I've built the story on is really strong. So I tend to write and rewrite the opening many times until I'm happy with it. I think the opening chapter now is only sort of chapter 3 or 4. I did then come back and write a prologue, which my editor did not like, and that has now become bonus content that people can email for. So it is a lot of testing, trying it, seeing it, going, okay, this doesn't work here. Where can I move it to, etc.
Wow. Did you like get up and write for 3 hours, or did the day, if you're a pantser, did the day just take you and then you're like, oh, now I'm going to write? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, I'm the most unstructured writer you will ever meet. There isn't like a structured day for me. There are days that I wake up and something is immediately in my head, and I grab a cup of coffee and I sit down in my pajamas, and it'll suddenly be 3 o'clock and I'm still in my pajamas and I'm still working. And then there'll be days where it just doesn't happen. Things aren't falling into place, but I'm thinking about it and I'm sort of brainstorming. And then maybe at 9 o'clock that night, I finally sit down to work. For me, I'm never going to be the writer that's like, 9 to 5 job. That's how it works because the podcast keeps me very busy. When I was writing this book, I was spending 3 to 4 days a week on the podcast. So it did not allow me normal working day in terms of writing this book. Most of the time I was writing it in the early hours of the morning or over the weekend or at night. So, for writers out there who are sort of obsessed with that, there has to be discipline and you have to write at this time to another. I recently interviewed Anne Napolitano, who wrote Hello Beautiful, and she was just talking about the 5 minute rule that she applied early on in her writing life. She said, there will always be distractions, there'll always be other things, but there will always be 5 minutes that you can just grab 5 minutes and sit down and write. And I find that if I give myself those 5 minutes, it might become something more. It might go into an hour or two. And yeah, it doesn't matter because it all eventually adds up. Like one paragraph leads to another, and eventually it'll lead to a finished
Yeah.
book.
But I may have days where I don't write, and then all of a sudden, like it'll hit me, and I'll be like, okay, spewing out, you know.
Yeah, but don't you find that on the days that you're not writing, you're still thinking about it? You're
Yes,
still, yeah, you're still ruminating, you looking at problems and you're going, this isn't the best way to write it. And so I feel like even if we aren't actually sitting writing, if we are still thinking about it and problem solving, that's a part of the process.
I agree. That's why sometimes you can write something, even if it's a short piece, like essays, and then you go away and then you come back and you're like, oh, I know how to edit this to make it sing, to make it work
Yeah.
really well. So I completely agree with that. And so tell me in terms of the chapters, because they're very short and there are a lot of them. I think we're past 70, right? How many are there altogether?
Oh my God, I
Oh
think we're
no,
like
we're in the 90s. Yeah. So it was like 96 was a choose your own conundrum. Yeah, and then it goes into the puzzle. So somebody told me, I forget who it was, somebody interviewed said, I write short chapters and I try to have each chapter like make one important point. Is that part of your thought process or no?
it isn't something that I consciously think of. I do try and keep my chapters short because that's the one thing all my readers throughout my books will go, I loved your short chapters. So even, in my earlier books, I kept my chapters short because people are always reading and it's at night and they like just one more chapter and they don't want to end in the middle of a chapter. And so I consciously keep them short as I can. I will generally sit down and go, what needs to happen in this chapter? Like, what reveal needs to happen? What plot point needs to happen to get us to the next step? What does the character know in this particular scene and what do they need to find out? And what change can happen in this scene, in this chapter? Because you want to constantly show things changing. How a character feels at the end should be different to how they feel at the beginning. You want to see them undergoing an emotional shift or a shift in the way that they think, etc. So yeah, it's constantly moving the story forward. And if you are going to introduce a new character in the next chapter, try and sort of have the previous character alluding to them so that it doesn't feel like this big shift and they're like, who the heck am I with now? If Hexibus was thinking about her daughter Evangeline in her chapter, then it feels organic that Evangeline is the next point of view character.
I love that. I want to unpack that a little bit more. That's a great tip, Bianca. So the idea is if you're going to introduce a brand new character, could it be also a brand new situation, or is it just really more of the character?
Yeah, if it's a new situation, anything. Like if you have a character thinking about what's happening at work in one scene while they're at home, and then the next chapter or scene opens at work, then you've kind of prepared them for that. It doesn't feel like they're, being taken out of the story or they don't feel confused as to what's happening. And this is something that I've learned from editors of my work. I had a wonderful editor on the book called Cade, who also looked at The Witches of Moonshine Manor. And each time then that I did a POV shift, they would say, it would help to prepare the reader for this by just alluding to this character beforehand, because then the reader is prepared for it. And that's something that I learned through that process.
That is a great tip. I'm going to use that. That's a wonderful tip because there's always like this feeling in shorter essays. I'm always saying to the writer that I'm working with, oh, there's no transition here. So with essays, it's like a shorter thing. You say something like, she didn't expect that would happen. And then you go into the next part. But with the book, you have to kind of really preface it and make it feel like the next part is just going to be a flow, just flowing into
Right.
the next one. Oh, that's wonderful. What other little tips and tidbits can you share in the process of writing a book?
Yeah, and that continuation is so important. So, like for example, in the one chapter, it ends with the umbrella being yanked out of Destiny's hand, and the umbrella flies off into the sky. And then we spend a few chapters with other characters. But then when we come back to Destiny, she's thinking about her umbrella. and then she moves into the next scene. So there's that continuity. So even though the reader hasn't spent 3 chapters with Destiny, they reminded what happened the last time we were with Destiny, and she's now picturing the umbrella, and then we move into the new scene. So as much as you can guide the reader through that, especially when you have so many different characters, as easy as you can make it for them to transition. Because the problem with the multi-POV novel is that there will always be certain chapters or certain POVs that the reader likes more. And of course, in this book, there is the main protagonist, Destiny Whip, who's trying to figure out the mystery. And then you have a lot of really diabolical characters. They are awful people who will do anything to get power. And so you need to make those chapters at least compelling so that even though the reader doesn't like the character, they don't mind spending time with the character because there are things that are being revealed that is essential to the understanding of the story or that will move the plot forward.
So with the villains, do you focus on making them villainy, or are you like, I have to make them so people can relate to their failings? It's not human failings, or was that part of the process, you know?
Yeah, you know what? Every villain does not see themselves as the villain in their own story. They see themselves as the protagonist and the hero in their own story. It's just in someone else's story that they are the villain. And so, I look at all of these people and they are villainous, but each of them has arrived at this point in their lives because of things that have happened. Each of them is damaged, bad things have happened to them, bad childhoods, bad fathers, whatever the case may be. And so, they don't really see themselves as villains. They just see themselves as people who need certain things. Like, for example, I have a character, Darius, who is one of the princes in the story, and he is just desperate to make his father proud of him. And he will do anything, he'll stop at nothing to get his father's approval. And a lot of people can relate to that. Even though he's doing terrible things to get his father's approval, so long as you give readers something that they can relate to in terms of a character's vulnerability, I think they can get on board with that character.
And that also reminds me of Succession because I was obsessed with that show. And the younger one, I forget who Kieran Culkin plays. I mean, he did some horrible things. And yet you felt for him because he wanted his father's love and, acknowledgement and all that. And he was brilliant in the role. But again, it's like people can be doing crazy, off the wall, devilish things, and they still have a motivation underneath it. And if you can show the motivation as the writer, the reader will be like, yeah, I don't like them, but I kind of get it.
Yeah, that's the thing. Give them something to relate to. And I think readers also do like, seeing villains get their comeuppance. So, that's part of their character arc as well, is seeing do they profit from their villainy or do things go badly for them? And I think readers love seeing that as well. So it's really important in a multi-POV novel to not just have a character arc for your main character, but like for your peripheral characters as well. You need to see a change in them as well along the way.
Yes. What about books that talk about writing a novel, like Save the Cat writes a novel, where they have very specific setups and they say, like in the third act, it's kind of like all the troops have to pull together to make something happen. Did you use any of that in your work?
I don't use it consciously, and I do say to emerging writers, look at that theory because it is so important. And if you keep looking at what should be where, you get an instinctive understanding for storytelling. I mean, I've got a copy of that book. I recommend it to everybody, but it's not that I ever opened it and was going, okay, this is what needs to happen now. It's just that because I have studied that, I do have an understanding of pacing in a story, and there needs to be a long, dark night of the soul. There needs to be that moment where it feels like all is lost, everything is despair, and then suddenly there's a triumph after it, etc. I think those kinds of books and that theory is so important to storytelling and for emerging authors to kind of study it until they get to the point where they've internalized it enough that they can feel their way in the dark and just kind of know what needs to happen next.
Brilliant. And in terms of resources, did you use any resources for the puzzles or looking at those kind of books with so many characters? Was there resources or was there a book that you modeled? Not exactly, but the idea, the way that things are working with it.
Yeah, so I read a lot of books on coming up with puzzles, on puzzle theory, on escape room games, on how to put together the perfect escape room, just to get that sense of how to change one puzzle from another so that it's different enough and how to challenge the reader. So I did a lot of research on puzzles and people who write puzzles, etc. But in terms of the multi-POV novel, no. I mean, my last book was six POVs. I started off with two, then I went to three, then I had six or seven actually, and then it came to this. And then with my next book, I might very well challenge myself to write one single POV, which is something I've never done before. I'm not committing to it because I do love a 360-degree story, and I don't know if I'm going to get bored with just one character for that long. But yeah, this is just kind of how the story evolved.
So are you thinking of doing another novel next or another cozy? And you have to explain to me what cozy mystery is.
Yeah, I mean, they call this a cozy mystery. I call it a not so cozy mystery. So, most cozy mysteries are like you'll think of Louise Penny. You have a little town, a setting where all the characters sort of know each other, and you will have generally it's an armchair detective, although Louise Penny has got a proper detective in hers, but it's kind of this cozy community and something bad happens there and everyone bands together and the person tries to solve it. I call mine a not so cozy murder mystery because it's got gothic, dark and stormy vibes. You do have these awful villains, etc. So yeah, there's that there. But I am thinking of going back to book club fiction after this. I have no intention to write another murder mystery or fantasy right now. I'm being pulled back to book club fiction again. But I mean, you never know. A book takes off, and if enough people like it, you get an opportunity to write a sequel. But for now, I'm focusing on something else.
And so you're already thinking of it. You're somebody who's published and you're moving on to the next. That's amazing. Kudos to you.
Yeah, I should have been much further along with that book actually by now. I circled the building of it a lot to find my entry point into it, but also a most puzzling murder was just so complicated to bring out into the world because we had to rewrite certain parts of it for the audiobook because so many of these puzzles are visual. And if somebody's busy walking and exercising or driving, they can't stop the audiobook to look at the puzzle. So we had to rewrite whole sections of the audiobook. There was a lot we had to do in the ebook version of it. There was a lot more editing involved in this book because we had to keep moving puzzles around. And if you change something like the choose your own adventure chapters, then the page number shifted. So, I spent a lot more time editing A Most Puzzling Murder than I would have with any other book. It took it like another 6 whole months just to make sure it was ready to be published.
And it was 479 pages, which is,
Yeah. And it was a lot more before that. So it was edited down and we got things in bonus chapters that were emailed. So it was a very difficult book to write technically. And I felt very sorry for my copy editor. I felt so sorry for my proofreader. I felt sorry for my audiobook people because it was very complicated.
and tell me about the bonus chapters, because I think that's brilliant. That's some of the things they say when you have a book, maybe have a bonus chapter, something that you can give, maybe somebody on Substack, paid subscribers, or people who are emailing you. And so when they email you about the question, do you also say, are you interested in a bonus chapter, or is it a separate promo thing?
No, so what will happen is like at the end of certain chapters, it'll be if you want a bonus clue or a bonus scene, then add these numbers together from the last puzzle and email it to get that bonus scene. So you weren't doing all the puzzles, so you wouldn't really have noticed that. But for people who are doing the puzzles, once they get the answer, then the next part is now add up those numbers and email for the bonus scene. And a lot of people are loving that. They're loving the bonus scenes. They're getting insight that other readers haven't necessarily got. And a lot of people have told me that although they're doing the choose your own adventure, they're reading both options because they
I
want
do.
to get all the clues
I
from
did.
everything. Yeah, I would as well.
That's so interesting too. Like it could have been enough just with the puzzles, but you also added choose your own conundrum, which is also character related. Like one of them is the guy that Evangeline is with, and another one is somebody connected to something else that was happening, murders. So how did you decide to do that, and where did that come in?
Yeah, so I really wanted the reader to be so actively engaged. And I love philosophical thought experiments. Like one of the first things is Philippa Foot's trolley experiment. Because as human beings, we think everything's cut and dried, and we get given a scenario and we're like, of course, this is the right answer. But this book is so much about unintended consequences. So many of these characters are dealing with unintended consequences. And so much of life is that you think you've made the right decision based on the information you have, and then it turns out to be a terrible decision, or someone else is affected by it, and you didn't realize that at the time. I wanted us to get back to a point where readers are using their critical thinking skills, because I feel like we are all being dumbed down to a place where if we don't see something on a 10-second reel or in a meme, we aren't able to process it. And I know my readers are smart people. So I was like, okay, I want to do these philosophical thought experiments that I want to include, but also there were instances that I needed to give the reader backstory or context. You have Ian who's walking around the island. He's just an islander. You see him again later, but he's not an important character. But he is somebody who's external to this family. He's objective. And so he can tell the reader things that Destiny doesn't know and that the rest of the family wouldn't tell the reader. So it allowed me to give backstory in an interesting way as opposed to just a flashback. It allowed me to give context in interesting ways. So it was really just having fun with the form.
That's so interesting. So, did you do the same thing? Did you figure out all your conundrums earlier and then connect them, or did you do the chapter and then do the conundrum?
Yeah, I would get to that point and I'd be like, what does the reader need to know to continue with this? Like, what context does the reader know? What do they still need to know? Who can tell them? And then I would be like, okay, who is the best character to include here in the choose your own conundrum? How can I include the thought experiment with the backstory, with the information that the reader needs? And that'll keep moving the story forward. So again, it was a lot of juggling, and sometimes things moved forward, sometimes things moved backwards. I'm constantly calibrating while I write. It's like having a tuning fork. And I'll write and be like, this doesn't actually work here. So where would it work better? And then I move it backwards and forwards and kind of play around with it to see where it'll really shine.
Is there any idea in your mind of like working with a puzzle company? It's just so connected to the puzzle world that in some way it could be connected. I'm not sure how. A game?
Yeah, I would love to come up with my own board game. It's something that I've always wanted to do. So if an opportunity arises, I would love to do that. Again, it
I,
just depends on, yeah, how well a book does. You know that. Like if a book does really well, it opens up all kinds of markets. So it really just does depend. But if there
yeah.
are those opportunities, I'd love that.
Mattel, reach out to Bianca. M. Mattel Marais. There you go.
There you go. Meant to
Alliteration.
be.
So, what do you want most to happen with this book out into the world, other than it do really well, of course?
Yeah, it's already found its people, and that's what makes me so happy because there's people who are like, oh my word, this is the most interesting and different book I've ever read. It was so engaging. And there's people who just absolutely got it and who have loved it. And that always makes me so happy. I want people to be wildly entertained. I want them to think. I don't want them to sit and passively consume the story. I want them to have theories. I want them to try and figure out what's going to happen next. I want them to keep turning pages. And if I can make them laugh along the way, then that's an added bonus for me.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I think that it's just so different. It's so different, but it's so engrossing. And you know what? I am going to email to get those clues and to get those
Yay.
bonus chapters because I want more. So
Yeah.
I want to read those bonus chapters. And
Thank you.
how many bonus chapters did you write?
I think there's 3 bonus scenes. There's one that's quite a long chapter, which was originally the prologue, which has now become a bonus chapter. And then there's 2 much smaller scenes, but they do give the reader more context, which helps them in terms of trying to solve the murder themselves.
That's wonderful. And so are you going to be also talking about on your podcast? I mean, it's part of your work. So,
Yeah. We have spoken about it on the podcast. I have gotten to chat to Cece about it, who is my agent, and we got to talk about the evolution of the piece and what she liked about it and how the work changed along the way. And we've also spoken about, the publishing aspect of it and the 2-book deal I was offered and why I turned that down, even though it was a wonderful deal, and why I rather went for a 1-book deal. So for those of you who are interested, you can find the episode. I think it was last week or the week before. They'll be able to find it with Bianca and Cece.
okay, great. I'll put it in the show notes for sure.
Thank you.
Is there anything else that you want to share? This has been wonderful. This has been like craft and your process and the wonder of the book. And I just love the character of Destiny Whip. And I love her friend and their relationship. And I love Hexabus.
Yeah, Hexabus is my favorite as well. Yeah, I mean, the book deals with serious themes. There's grief
Yeah.
and there's finding your people and found family. So all of my books will have that, even though, this is more sort of puzzle based and more genre based. But I
Yeah.
think just what I want to add is that for anyone, writing a book feels like building a puzzle. And any book, whether you're writing memoir, it doesn't matter what genre you're writing in, it really feels like you're building a puzzle that's all white and you're trying to fit the pieces together and you've got nothing to guide you. And sometimes the pieces will fit and sometimes they won't. And that is just part of the process. But try and have fun with it. Experiment. There will be times that you'll be really frustrated, and there'll be times that you'll wake up at 2 a.m. with the solution to something that's been bothering you forever. And that is the part of writing that I just delight in and that I find so rewarding.
So everybody, A Most Puzzling Murder, the novel, it's worth every bit of time you're going to spend diving in to Destiny's world, the Scrufflemore family's world, and all the puzzles galore. Thank you so much, Bianca.
Thanks so much, Estelle.
Follow me at EstelleSErasmus.com on my website and on social media, which is Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Estelle S. Erasmus. And we're now on YouTube for Freelance Writing Direct. Follow along, and soon everyone will be reading what you're writing.